Hello, my friends. Today we're going to talk about how to separate yourself out from thoughts and feelings. This is sometimes known as witnessing or observing, taking up the standpoint of the witness or observer. And we're going to go into why this is useful and how you can do it. So it's useful because very often, almost all of the time, we're completely identified and blended with our thoughts and our feelings. It feels like that's who and what we are. It feels like that voice in our head is us. It is myself talking to myself, worrying about this and that. And this isn't actually the case. And when we're completely identified and merged with these parts of ourselves, though, it actually becomes really hard to see them more neutrally or notice what's actually happening. It's like we're trying to find the glasses, we're wearing a pair of sunglasses and everything we see is tinted with the color of that sunglass. It's where you're looking from. And when you're really identified with these thoughts and feelings, it's like you're looking or observing the world from that place or through that place, and you can't actually see where you're standing. You can't notice the thoughts that are coloring your perception. You can't notice the feelings that are a filter of how you're experiencing reality. And this puts you at a big disadvantage if you want to become more aware and more conscious and not be totally swept away in your experience by your thoughts and feelings, right? You may have had that experience of just, you get triggered and just whoosh, your thoughts are just, you're getting lost in a void, in a hurricane of thoughts, or there's feelings pulling your attention in and there's nothing you can do about it. We're going to try and give you a little bit more space in this video by teaching you some of these skills. So this is also really, really useful for healing. If we actually want to learn how to heal our emotional wounds by feeling some of the difficult feelings, we need to learn this, or it's very helpful to learn this skill because it really opens up our interior world. Again, like I said, rather than being sort of really trapped in this one point, continuously reacting to all the thoughts and feelings, taking a witness position gives us a little bit more space. It just reduces the level of reactivity a little bit. And you actually have more space from the contents of your experience. You can start to notice what's going on and observe, inquire, feel into, explore in a way that's a bit more grounded. There are nuances to that, and I'll mention that at the end of the video. But this place of witnessing or observing is much more still and calm. It's not involved in the play, in the contents of experience. And it turns out that's a very valuable thing because with that space you can relate to things differently. Thoughts and feelings become, you can bring slightly more curiosity to the table here. So what am I talking about? What I'm talking about is learning to step back from the contents of your experience, the thoughts and the feelings, and to observe them almost as if from a distance. Now, you're not ever separate from your thoughts or your feelings, but you aren't ultimately them either. They're kind of parts of you, or they're something that you're doing, but they're not something you are fundamentally. And so this means that, that voice in your head, for example, we think it is us, but we can actually learn to step back and view it as if from a distance. And that's what I'm fundamentally talking about here. And I'll go into a bit of a guided demo that will make this clearer exactly how this works. But it can be helpful to practice this at first with things that are slightly less triggering. It's going to be hard if you're really triggered and and overwhelmed, there's loads going on. It's going to be hard to practice this for the first time. But you can practice it with neutral thoughts and sensations first, and then start, as you develop your skills, you can learn to sort of be the witness in even very intense or triggered situations. Which again helps give you a bit more space. The trigger will tend to last not quite as long or won't be quite as intense as it otherwise would be. Another little tip here as a final tip before we get into the actual practice, it can be helpful to use the language of parts here. Often we talk in quite absolute or totalizing language. I think she's horrible, or I think he needs to try harder, or I'm angry, or I'm upset, or whatever it is. We talk about in very black and white terms, but it's from this witness position, it's much easier if we talk about parts of us. So it's like, okay, there's a part of me that doesn't like her. There's a part of me that thinks he should try harder. There's a part of me that's angry. There's a part of me that's worried. And so on. And this makes them seem more, different parts of us, it makes them seem slightly less, in a sense, true. It's, we're relativizing their sense of truth. It's like, okay, it's true for this part that I'm worried, but it's not true in some bigger sense. It breaks it down, so you're looking only at one piece of the jigsaw at a time. It doesn't feel like, oh, I am worried and all of me is worried and I need to do something about this now. It gives a bit more space for curiosity. So with that said, let's start to just jump into some practical stuff here. So take a moment just to settle in, get comfy, and close your eyes and start to check in and get present with your experience. And we can start just by bringing up a neutral thought. Maybe you could think of a person you like. That might even be too triggering in a sort of a positive way, actually. Let's just think of a tree. A nice tree that you like. And we're trying to bring curiosity to the actual phenomenon of thought itself, rather than getting too lost in, oh, that's a tree, and yeah, I really like the tree, and that reminds me of this time when I saw a tree the other day. Like, imagine the tree and start to notice what's actually here, the actual thought itself, the direct experience of the thought. That silvery, shimmery thing that's floating in your mind space. And here you want to almost try and strip back the meaning. You can forget the word tree, you can forget the connotations of the tree, you can forget whether you like it or not. It's almost like you're looking at this thought as if you're looking at a painting. And you're just looking at the paint. You're not trying to say, oh, the paint comes together to paint a picture of a tree. You're looking at the actual brush strokes itself. Like, what is this painting actually made out of, just moment by moment? And you can do the same with a thought and just noticing maybe the shape of the thought, the size of the thought. Is it a big thought? Is it a small thought? Where is it in your mind space? Is it at the top of your head? Is it behind your head? Is it sort of in front of you in some way? Does the thought have a particular color? Is some of these aspects changing, or is it quite static? These are sort of the qualities of the thought you can start to notice. And noticing here that you aren't actually the thought. This is something that you're observing, you're witnessing. You were here before, the thought was here. The thought then arose, you're still here, and the thought will go and you'll still be here. It's just something you're temporarily doing. Now imagine that you're observing this thought from 5 feet behind your body. So you're creating sort of more distance between yourself and this thought. Noticing how that feels, as if your attention is just sort of seeping through, just sort of wafting into your body and your mind space from that distant point behind you. And your attention, your awareness is creeping in to take note of this thought. And noticing how different it feels as well compared to being completely wrapped up in thoughts with your attention really tightly bound to them. In fact, helpful here can be even to notice the space around the thought. Noticing that you don't have to get tied into it. You can look at the thought, or you can just notice the space around it, which helps give you a bit more distance or space, freedom from it. And now you can try the same thing, maybe with something mildly triggering. Maybe you could bring up an image of someone you've had a bit of an argument or altercation with recently, or with whom you're currently experiencing a bit of difficulty. Nothing too much, but just bring in an image of that person. And I'd like you to pause the video in a moment and just see if you can repeat those same steps with this slightly more intense thought, noticing how it gets a bit more tricky when the thought gets more heavy and sticky. But you can still, in principle, just really start to notice the details of this particular thought of this person, looking at them, looking at that thought like you're looking at a painting, just noticing the colors and the shapes, removing all meaning and interpretation. It's just a meaningless blob floating in your experience. So you can pause if you want to explore that a little bit more. I will continue on to sensations, which we can do the same thing with. We'll start with a neutral physical sensation. So see if there's a little bit of pressure you feel in the body somewhere, your butt on the chair, or maybe there's a tension or an ache. And just bring your attention to it in the same way, that kind of curiosity. You're just noticing the direct experience of the sensation. You're dropping the labels of what part of the body it is or what that quality might be, whether it's tense or heavy or whatever. Just staying as close as you can to just raw experience. Noticing the shape, the size, the color. Again, you can maybe imagine you're witnessing this sensation from a distance, maybe 5, even 10 feet behind you, as if it's something quite far away and separate. So it should feel like you're sort of holding it at a distance and observing it. And again, noticing that you aren't this sensation, even if it's a part of your body. This isn't what you are because you are observing it. This sensation wasn't always here, but you were always here. And then the sensation came along at a certain point, and the sensation will go, and you'll still be here. At most, it's something you're doing. Your body is creating this sense of this sensation. But you're not bound up with it. You're not blended with it, merged with it necessarily. Another trick here can be to imagine that the thoughts and feelings you experience are someone else's. So they're not relevant to you. They don't actually have any meaning to you, because the reason we get so sucked into thoughts and feelings is because we feel they may have some critical information to say about us, which sometimes they do, but more often than not, what the mind's saying isn't actually as important as it seems to think. You can also imagine that these thoughts are coming in from someone else. It's like, oh, someone else is thinking about their mother. Someone else is worrying about the work they've got to do later on. And again, this is not a prescription for life, but just as an exercise in the moment, it can be quite helpful to just get a different view on these thoughts. Almost like you don't understand what they are. It just gives you a totally different place to observe them from that's got a lot more space in it. Imagine if these thoughts you had in your head were Chinese. You wouldn't understand any of them, and you'd have a very different perspective on them. Even if the content was, if you translated it, were the same. So hopefully this has given you somewhat of a flavor of observing. And really key here is the allowing as well. Hopefully you can see that in this space, when we're just noticing, getting curious about how things are showing up, there's a bit more space for allowing in all of this. And curiosity. So we can maybe actually, as the last thing, just practice that, bringing that distance in, imagining you're observing from a bit of a distance, and then just bringing the curiosity as if this is someone else's body, someone else's mind. Seeing if there's more space to allow it now. So that hopefully is now giving you some idea of what I'm talking about. And I'll just, as a final point, there's a tool I kind of like to use. I call it the identification dimmer switch. You'll notice that during this exercise, you've become sort of, maybe you started out being a bit more identified with something and you become a little bit less as you were practicing. This capacity for identification is one of the facets of your mind. And you can actually play with it. You can become more and less identified, blended, merged with different things. And it can actually be really useful for healing, to be really merged and fully experience something. But the key is that you want to learn to witness it first. So, if you're trying to feel your anger, but you've never stepped back and just observed how it's coming to you, got to know it sort of with curiosity as a part of you. If you just feel you are it, you're just this angry person, you can't do healing from there. You need to learn to step back first, witness these parts of you, turn down the identification dimmer switch. Then after you spend a bit of time there getting to know that part, then you can step back into it. You can almost turn up that dimmer switch again, and then start to really, because that really helps the anger come alive. It's quite hard to really feel the anger alive when you're very detached and distant from it. There is a time and a place to step into it, really merge it and become it. But you want to do that very consciously, from having first stepped back and then consciously stepping back in. So then you know that it's not you, that it's just something that's happening or that you're doing temporarily. And so you can really allow that without getting lost in it. And if you want some more tips on how to do that, I've got lots of videos on anger that you can search for, or how to feel your feelings and so on. There we go. I hope this was helpful. And I do help people one-on-one, working with how to feel their feelings to heal their trauma, connect to the body, feel safe in the body, all this good stuff. So if that's of interest, reach out and take care.